Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Ren is a mom to 3 kiddos, or pandalings as she likes to call them, 2 girls and 1 fresh little boy. She loves Babywearing and became a certified Babywearing educator with Babywearing International before they shut down in 2018. Ren helps to run 2 local babywearing groups, the Bay State Babywearers and North Shore Babywearing. She is currently on maternity leave, but Ren also works as a swim coach and an assistant cake and cupcake decorator. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lauren. I'm very excited to have you and to chat all things baby wearing.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, before we kind of jump into, talking about all the different apparatuses and whatnot, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself? And I know your bio will play before this, but a little bit about you and kind of why you became so obsessed with baby wearing and like how you are with all the baby wearing networks and groups now.
Sure. So I'm Lauren. I go by Ren for short. So if you see me on the internet, that's usually how you'll find me. I have 3 kiddos. I have 2 girls and a boy. I have an almost 7-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, and my son is 5.5 months old, which is crazy.
Insane.
So I baby wore from the start with my big one, Amy. So I've been baby wearing for almost 7 years, and then I started being like a volunteer and an educator around a little bit before her first birthday. So for almost 6 years now. I volunteer with 2 local baby wearing organizations. One is Bay State Babywearers and the other is North Shore Babywearing. So I help admin both of those groups, and I also I am a volunteer educator. Before Babywearing International went kaput, I did their educator training doohickey. So I know a little bit about everything. I baby wore right from the start with Amy because, you read all the lists of all the stuff you should get for your kids' eyes. So I was like, I looked at all the different kinds and I was like, all right, I'm going to get this kind. And then, so I'm a big nerd and I wanted a Harry Potter carrier and I couldn't get my hands on this one that was super popular. It was a Tula and I was like, well, I'm not paying $1,200 market value for it. So I ended up getting a woven wrap to send to somebody to like sew it on top of a Tula. Ooh. And then that's how I kind of went down the rabbit hole of everything because I was like, oh, well, this is beautiful. I want wraps. And there are a lot more like nerdy wraps and options in that sphere. And that's how I got into everything because I'm a nerd, basically.
It's one of those things that it's like, they're useful, but they're also kind of like collectibles in a way, right? Like some of the stuff is like really hard to find. Like there's been multiple people that post in the group like, oh, I'm looking for this specific thing. I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but everyone's like, good luck. I'm like, oh my goodness. So that's so cool. And now when you're, I guess, kind of dive into parts of it, when your little ones are super little, what are kind of your favorite types of carriers? What kinds of carriers exist in the world? Give us all the info.
So when they're teeny tiny, I like stretchy wraps and I also like a ring sling. Those are my 2 favorites for teeny tinies. Stretchies are so nice because they're just so comfy. It's like wearing a shirt. And a lot of people have the Catan, which is a lot of people tell you to get that for new babies, which is there's pros and cons to it, but it's great because people feel less intimidated by it than the wraps because they're so long.
Right.
And then a ring sling is nice because it's, especially if you have a summer baby, because it's just one layer and you put them in. It's got a little bit more of a learning curve, but it's nice. And just, there's less stuff.
Yes,
And
I
then
love that.
the ring slings are nice because they're supportive even if you have like a preemie, as long as they don't have any issues that you have to deal with. Because a lot of carriers are safety tested at like 8 pounds. So if you have a baby that's smaller than that, a lot of people are concerned about using it beforehand. So a ring sling you're able to adjust it to their teeny tiny body and support them properly.
Yes, I
But yeah,
love
those are
that.
my favorite too.
Because so many of them, when people go on to make their baby registries that pop up, are the larger structured carriers, which are great, but they do typically start at that 8 pound mark. And most of my clients that I work with are like, well, my baby, it was never 8 pounds, or even if they were born over 8, like they've lost enough weight to not be there yet. And so they're like, even when they are 8 pounds, they still like look just so little and awkward in like a big
Mm-hmm.
structured carrier. And so I'm often suggesting using those as well. And adjusting them nice and tight can make them, feel less intimidating too.
Absolutely. And also, it's nice to have
Now,
your arms.
so nice to have your arms. Now we've said there's, you know, big stretchy wraps, you've got ring slings. What other types of options do people have when it comes to baby carrying? And I guess when you kind of go over all the different options, is there a best like age or type of person to be using, like personality, lifestyle, whatever, to be using these different types of wraps, or do they tend to kind of be fitting all personalities, vibes, all the things?
Sure. So there are main carrier types, as we call them. So you have your buckle carriers, which is going to be your soft structured carriers, and also like your front pack carriers. So these are going to be your big names like Tula, Lila Baby, Ergo, and then your front pack carriers, the Baby Bjorn, and those type. And those are all pretty similar, but each one has its own little differences. But those are the ones you see most often these days. And they have the buckles for the waistband and they have the shoulder straps pretty much. But yeah, and then we have ring slings and also pouch slings, which you don't see as often. But ring slings are going to be the longer piece of fabric sewn onto two rings that you do over yourself like an 80s belt.
Yeah.
And then pouch slings are similar to a ring sling, but they're sized, so they don't have the adjustability. You don't see those as much anymore.
Huh.
Those can be tricky because you have to have them fit exactly right, and you need a
Right.
different size once your kid gets bigger.
I was gonna say that must be tricky when they get bigger, because you do have to buy probably like so many different like sizes.
I mean, it's great if you get the right size because it's all sewn in and there's no adjusting. Just pop it on and stick them in. And then you have your Maydais, which are kind of similar to buckle carriers, but you have ties for the waist and your straps. So it's nice because it's kind of an in between a wrap and a buckle carrier. So it's not as bulky as a buckle carrier, and you also have a little bit more customability. Is that a word?
We can make it one. That's fine.
But yeah, you can customize the fit a little bit more. So that's nice. And then you have your wraps, which you have stretchy wraps, which are going to be that jersey two-way stretch material. And then you have woven wraps, which don't stretch as much, but you can use for forever, pretty much. Stretchy wraps are wonderful for when they're little, but around 15 pounds or so, they start to get a little uncomfortable. For not everybody, some people use them, but a lot of caregivers find that around 15 pounds stretchy wraps just aren't as comfortable because baby's getting heavier, which makes it stretch, and then they also get a lot wigglier around that point too. So between those two things, you put them in, and then after a little while they're sagging because of all of those factors.
Right.
But yeah, so those are the main carrier types. And you're asking what's good for different ages. And what's nice is, even since I've started baby wearing has become much more mainstream, which is great, which means it's a lot more known, and then there's a lot more availability. Like, because when I started, it was even more difficult to find things. There was a lot of like KinderPack is one of the big soft structured carrier brands, and it was like, you know, one of those sell out in minutes kind of thing where you had to jump all over it. But it's a lot easier to get a hold of a lot more different options.
Yes.
Which is really nice. And then really, honestly, it's whatever you like the best. In the early days, if you have a teeny tiny baby, your options might be a little more limited, but that is only temporary. So really, it's whatever you find most comfortable and works best for you and your little one, which is great. So like, I have a little bit of everything. You've been to my house here.
Oh, I love it. I literally took a picture of your wall one day. So for those of you who are listening, Ren obviously manages these groups. And then she has her own carriers. And then she's also got like the lending library for a group, which is what I was going to mention again in a second here, was that there are so many carriers and they can be expensive. So if you are wanting to try things out and you don't know what you like, you know, if you're in the area, check out the lending libraries. They're great. But I'm sure that wherever you are, there's got to be a Facebook group that I'm sure has a lending library. But yes, I took a picture of your wall one day and I was like, oh, I'm just going to save this so that when I have children, I can just be like, this is the dream.
I do. That was the one thing. A friend of mine, Anna, she's actually a very fancy like muralist down in the North Shore now, came and painted my wall, and I have the koalas that says "I'll carry you in my heart always" because I'm a mush, and I hang up all. In theory, I hang up all of my carriers over there. But yeah, so it's really what works best for you, what you like. I have everything. The only one I'm not as much a fan of is Maydies, because I'd either rather just wrap them or use a structure carrier. But I have a friend of mine who only used Maydies. And yeah, so there are some people like me that use a little bit of everything, depending either on the situation or sometimes it's whatever's closest at hand. Yeah. There are other people, generally, not necessarily always, but most of the time, the dads like the buckle carriers because they just click them on and go. Though that's not always the case. A friend of mine, he only wraps. That's the only thing he does, which is not as common. And then some people like the buckle carriers because you click them on and go, which is nice.
Less intimidating at times, I find.
Yeah. But if you're worried about other things being not as quick, another friend of mine can wrap her kid as fast as I can get somebody in a buckle carrier. So it's just a matter of practicing and finding what works best for you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you want to use all of them, there are I like the ring sling and the stretchy wrap when they're teeny tiny. When they get to that toddler stage where they want to come up and down a lot because they're, they can walk and they want to explore. Ring slings are great because you can just, they're small and you can stick them in the bag and they can go in and out as they please. So yes, you can adjust to their needs. There's options for everything. It's great.
I love that.
But it can also be intimidating. So many options, which is great. And like you said, there are lending libraries. There are a little less than there were because Babywearing International was the big baby wearing nonprofit across the country, and they shut down a few years ago. But so some groups shut down, but a lot of groups went independent. So like Bay State Baby Wearers, we used to be a BWI group. But yeah, there are a lot of lending libraries around, which is nice because you can try the different carriers rather than going out and buying one because they can get expensive.
They can get expensive for sure, especially if you don't know what you're doing with it too. It's nice to be able to go like try carriers also in a setting where there's going to be people that can say like, oh, try this or do this, or I think you might like this one better. So I love that. That's an option at all. I always tell my clients, I'm like, here, go follow this group.
Yeah, it's really great. Almost everybody has like social Facebook groups. So you can go in and be like, this is my situation. This is how old my baby is. And this is how much they weigh. And, you can say what kind of features you're looking for in a carrier and they'll be able to recommend them to you because they do the same thing. They carry your baby, but they're all slightly different. Even if you just go with like one type, like the buckle carriers is probably the most common one that you'll see. And a lot of people are very much like one brand. If they find the one that works for them, that's what they recommend to everybody, right, which is great. And it's great that you love that brand and that it works great for you. But what, works for your best friend might not work for you because you might have a different body type. You have different babies. Like soft structure carriers, Tula, Little Baby, Kinder Pack, all of those. They're all essentially the same, but they're all slightly different. We talk about them being kind of like finding jeans. So they're the same, but they're not the same.
Right.
And the only way you really know is if you try them.
I love that.
So that's true. What's nice about,
I love it. Now, I guess my question for you would be, a lot of my clients will say, wow, they're making their baby registries. They have no idea, like strollers and baby carriers seem to be the two things that people are like, there are too many options and I don't know what the heck to put on my registry. And so either I just went with, like you said, what my sister or my neighbor said to do, or people are like, I just told my partner to do some Googling and add it because I just couldn't think about it anymore. And so I find a lot of my clients end up with either the Catan, because it's like the most simplistic looking soft typed wrap, or the Ergo Omni 360. So do you think that those are good places to start if people are listening and they haven't made their registries or ordered things yet, or are looking for somewhere to start baby wearing? What do you suggest is the best place to start to kind of like try it out and see what people are thinking about it?
So obviously the best option, even if baby's not here yet, would be to find a lending library and see if there's a meeting that you can go to and try things, or even if there's a group that you can ask in and ask for recommendations from educators, because educators, we're going to recommend to you what we think will work best for you, not necessarily what is our personal favorite.
Right.
So that would be the best option. But if that is not in the realm of possibilities, or you just don't want to talk to people, which is fair. Sometimes I don't want to talk to people either. The Catan and the Ergo are both fine options, and they work for a lot of people for the reasons you said. The Catan is great, but the sizing can be off. Yeah. So I know that, there's like a size chart and that's what you go by. It doesn't necessarily work out once you get it. A lot of times it can be too big because stretchy wraps should fit you pretty snugly, like a snug t-shirt, and then it stretches once you put baby in. But obviously you're not going to know that until baby is here.
Right.
Which again, lending libraries, usually we have demo dolls, fake babies that you could try, or sometimes we have our own real babies that you can
pass the baby.
Yeah. I totally have done that. I'm like, here, would you like to try it with this baby?
It's practice. It's practicing parenthood pre-birth. I love that.
So yeah, if you want a stretchy wrap, the Catan is a good option. There are a lot more options now that might be better. Like I know Lila Baby, I don't follow them as closely now, but they had, it's called the Dragonfly, and it's similar to the Catan, but there's adjustability, so you can adjust it without having the whole shebang of the wrap. And let's see, there's an Ergo Embrace, which is kind of like a buckle carrier, but
I've seen people
a stretchy.
Like those.
And there's also, I think Boppy makes one as well. So there are other options that offer a little bit more adjustability than the Catan, but are still that stretchy wrap kind of fabric. Mm-hmm. So one of those might be a better option if you're looking for a stretchy wrap type carrier for the early days.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, the Ergo. The Ergo is a great carrier. They're a great brand. They have great carriers. Personally, for me, I've always found the Ergo a little bit bulky, which sometimes is great. Like my first daughter was super fat, and so Little Baby is another one that's very padded and offers a lot of structure. And some people find that bulky, but she was so fat that I needed her in that one because
Right.
whenever I put her in something else, my back hurt because she was
Yep.
just so fat.
She did have the chunky cheeks too.
Yeah.
Such a baby.
And now she's almost 7.
I know, I can't. Don't even. Nope. Oh, I find a lot of people. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
I was gonna say, I find a lot of people end up liking or finding the Ergo because it does pop up on Google as one of the first ones. And a lot of people are like, I don't know if I'm gonna like Babywearing. And if I do, I don't want to spend money on like 16 different carriers because they don't understand the reasoning behind why you might want to have multiple carriers. And the 360 doesn't have the newborn insert. You can just or the Omni, whatever one it is, you can adjust from 8 pounds. I think it's to like 42 or something. I don't know. And so I think a lot of my clients are like, oh, this is great because like I can just get one carrier and it'll fit for the whole time. And then, like you said, I'm often then telling them like, sure, but there's other options that you might like better. And if you don't like think about exploring them, you might just be like putting yourself in back pain or making your baby uncomfortable in a carrier that, you know, you could be really loving it with a different one.
Yeah, so no, you're definitely right. It comes up really frequent. And then another feature that I find a lot of parents to be or new parents think they need is the forward facing out, like the world facing position, which is something that Ergo the 360 offers.
Yeah.
And so a few things about that. Number one, sometimes you'll hear that it's not safe for babies' hips, which is incorrect. It is totally fine for them to be forward facing out, or also like the front pack carriers where their legs are a little bit more dangly, like the Babywearing. Those are all totally safe as long as baby doesn't have any pre-existing hip conditions. They're totally fine. They might be a little more uncomfortable for you to wear, but baby will be fine. Usually they're kind of made of rubber and they'll be fine. And then the second thing about world facing, by the time they're big enough, so you don't want to do forward facing out until they're sitting mostly unassisted because the body mechanics of it, their spine is facing away from you and it's not like curving into your body.
Right.
So you want them to be able to have enough muscle tone in their trunk and in their head and neck that they can protect their airway looking out.
Yep.
And by the time that they're at that stage, usually they're big enough for a back carry and they can see just as much from a back carry and it's going to be a lot more comfortable for you, the wearer. So if that's a feature that you're looking for and you feel that you need, know that it's not necessarily something that you do need.
Right.
There are other options and usually they're just as happy. And don't get me wrong, I totally did it. We did it at places like the zoo and the aquarium, but not 100% necessary. I guess if I had to make a unilateral recommendation, which isn't something I do because, like I said, it depends on your body type and what your needs are. I would probably go for a brand that has like a medium level of padding and support. So you're like in the middle of the road. Yep. So like Kinder Pack and Tula are probably two that come to mind. That are kind of middle of the road, whereas like Happy Baby Carrier, which I'm sure you've heard of and some of the listeners have heard of, that's a very trendy mommy brand right now. I know those are difficult to get a hold of, but those have like no padding at all. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have your little baby and your Ergo that are more padded and more structured. So maybe something in the middle of the road, like Tula or Kinder Pack. And then most new parents don't know, you can also, there's a lot of like BST groups on Facebook where you can get one pre-loved, I like to call it.
Yes.
That it's going to be a lot cheaper than buying it new if you don't want to make that big investment.
Yes. No, that's great. And then it kind of brings us, you kind of mentioned like the safety stuff with hips. I'd love to get a couple tips on, so now people have baby carriers and they're trying to put them in them. I know every carrier is a little bit different, so obviously safety features and things like that are going to be different, but are there any things that people should be doing safety wise to protect themselves and their baby when they are baby wearing, like, you know, positioning or length of time that that babies should be allowed in carriers or anything like that?
So my number one thing is going to be read your manual, because every manufacturer is going to have different recommendations about you know, what each position is like age-wise for, like the forward facing out, back carrying. So before anything else, go by your manufacturer's recommendations for positions. And then so for safety, we talk about our ABCs. The first one is airway. You want to always make sure you're protecting baby's airway, especially with those little babies who have such a teeny tiny airway. You want to make sure they're close enough to kiss, we say. So you want them high enough on your chest. And I'm motioning with my body.
I know. I was saying it was
but
tricky.
People listening can't see me. I'm motioning on my body. So you want them close enough that you can kiss their head without having to, like, you know, overexert yourself, so that they're close enough to your face that you can monitor their breathing. You want to be mindful of their body position. So again, with the little babies, you want to make sure they're not slumped, that they're properly supported. Little babies are going to have what we call a C curve in their spine. You want to make sure they're never chin to chest. So that's always, if they're chin to chest, that means their airway is not open. And then comfort. You want to make sure everyone's comfortable. You're comfortable, baby's comfortable. There's different positions that are so like front facing in, hip carry on your back. So depending on what position there's like ideal positioning, like check marks.
Yeah.
But generally, most people are going to be using soft structured carriers. And as long as you're keeping them close enough to kiss, because I know a lot of caregivers are nervous about doing things unsafely.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to use a buckle carrier unsafely. So I want to reassure everybody listening that if you're using a soft structure carrier, a buckle carrier, and as long as they're close enough to kiss and they're not slumping, it's very difficult to use them unsafely. They're highly likely not going to fall out.
Yes. Yes.
So let's see what else. Usually we talk about for body positioning, you want babies' knees to be higher than their bum. When they're little, I will say, because as they get bigger, it becomes more, their knees are going to be in line with their bum once they get to toddler size and beyond. You're not going to have your preschoolers scrunched up.
Tucked their knees all
the
up,
way a newborn is. Oh, and then for positioning, that forward-facing out, that world-facing position that we mentioned before, safety thing about that is that you want to do it in limited amounts of time, because baby can get overstimulated. And then, because when they're facing into you, they can just hide their face into you. But when they're looking out, there's nowhere for them to stick their face if they're like done. So watch for signs of overstimulation, which is like if they're getting fussy, if their eyes get that kind of glazed over look, and you want to turn them back around. And then the same thing for sleeping. If they fall asleep forward facing out, you always want to turn them around to facing you right away, again, to protect their airway. I'm probably forgetting things because my brain is made of mush.
It's all right. There's so many things. It is. And it's tricky to give like generalized information too, because we are talking about so many different carriers. So if anybody is listening, find a group near you. And if you can't, come over and join, one of the two groups that Ren helps out with. And you can always ask questions there, or, message one of the two of us, and happy to get you connected with people. My last question that I always ask people, and it doesn't have to be baby wearing related, but it's always, if you had one piece of advice and like a product recommendation or something like that, it doesn't have to be a specific item. I guess it could be a service and people have used. What would you suggest to a new parent, and what kind of like advice would you share?
Well, the product is you, obviously, Madison.
I'm done. I can't. And that's the thing. Like, I always say product, but then I'm always like, there's so many people that come on. And I think I literally said it probably last episode. I don't know. I'm recording a bunch at the same time. And I was like, I think people are going to think that I'm bringing people on and telling them, when I ask you this question, you have to say that postpartum doulas are like what you recommend. No, I'm not. I swear.
No, postpartum doulas are great. I didn't have Madison for either of my other two. I had her for my third, and it was wonderful. And it was a great thing to have, not something that you 100% you're going to die if you don't have. It's a nice to have if you can. My advice would probably be just go with the flow, you know, roll with the punches, and, you know, you're doing a great job.
Yes.
You love your babies, and that's the most important thing. You're doing great, even when you feel like you're not. You're doing great. You're a great mom. You're a great dad. You're a great caregiver. You're doing awesome.
I love that. That's so true, because it does. The doubt really does creep in. So I appreciate that. Well, if anybody wants to find the groups, I'm going to put them in the show notes below. I'm going to put Ren's information below too, so you can reach out if you have questions, and go over to my Instagram too, because I will post pictures of different baby carriers at some point in the week that this posts up as well, so that people can kind of like see all the things that we've been like talking about. And yes, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.